Welcome to the Sober and Happy podcast, where we talk about all things recovery related, how to navigate the challenges that we'll face along the way on our journey towards our best lives, and how we can go from living a life of simply just being sober to a life where we're both sober and happy. When we get sober, we face a lot of challenges. Most of the focus in the recovery world is on the things we need to avoid in our environment, such as dealing with being around alcohol. However, having had past failures in the years before finally getting sober, along with working with many people over the years, I have found that the biggest dangers for a relapse actually lurk within us. So what things should we be looking out for that might be leading us down a dangerous path? Well, that is what we're going to discuss today. So buckle up. This is going to be a great episode. Welcome back. When we often talk about red flags, we're looking for things in other people, places, or things that we should take a hard look at or maybe avoid. However, we usually don't look for red flags within our own behaviors, which often is just as important, if not more important, than looking for red flags outside of us, especially in recovery. Over the years, having worked with a lot of people who want to get sober, I've picked up on certain phrases and behaviors that I've come to call relapse red flags. In this episode, I want to talk about the most common ones that I have seen, how to recognize them in ourselves, and what we should do once we do recognize them. The first one that I think is the most common often starts even before someone quits drinking, and that is when we predict our own failures. I have lost count of how many times I've seen someone say something like, "I can never make it past 30 days." And then that is the story they tell during their first 30 days, often more often as day 30 starts to approach. And guess what? They usually drink before 30 days because they already committed to the relapse before it even happened. Henry Ford once said, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right." I often get asked what the biggest difference was between all my past failed attempts at getting sober and this time when I have been able to stay sober. It was my mindset shift. The first time I tried to quit drinking, I drank on day 30. Every time after that, I repeated the narrative that I couldn't ever get past 30 days, and that was true 100% of the times that I said that. This last time, I honestly had no idea if I could get and stay sober. However, my narrative changed too. I'm going to do whatever I can within my power to stay sober. As soon as I stopped creating the self-fulfilling prophecy of never making it past 30 days, I blew right past that milestone and haven't looked back since. And as of the day this episode will be published, will be day 4,625. The next red flag that I see all the time, especially in people early in recovery, is telling what is referred to as war stories. If you're not familiar with the phrase, this is when people sit around and brag about their past alcohol or drug use. A funny thing happens when people get clean and sober, which I quickly learned after arriving at rehab. We go from people who often downplay our drinking and lie about how many drinks we had last night by saying things like, "Oh, I only had a few drinks," to full out bragging or one-upping each other once we get sober. Someone would say, "I drank a bottle of vodka every day." Then someone else would chime in and say, "That's nothing. I had a bottle of vodka before lunch every day and would drink 2 more before the end of the night." The problem is that when we brag about our past, we are staying stuck in our past. You cannot be in 2 places at one time. So if you want to live a sober life, brag about your accomplishments today instead. I'd rather hear someone brag about showing up to their kid's Little League game or facing a fear that held them back most of their life than how much they used to be able to drink. Now, there are some benefits to talking about your past. If you listen to episode 59, where we talk about shame, you know that one of the essential ingredients for shame is secrecy. However, there's a big difference between talking with someone to work through shame around some of your past behaviors while you're in your addiction and trying to one-up someone about how much you drank. There's also a benefit to talking about your drinking to relate with someone else who's struggling. However, if you're just telling stories about your past just to tell stories, that can be a dangerous path. The biggest danger in telling war stories is they often lead to the next red flag we need to watch out for, and that is romanticizing about the good old days. This is when we skip over all the destroyed relationships, lost jobs, DUIs, and every other consequence our addictions got us, and go back to when alcohol or drugs still worked. Nostalgia can be a tricky thing. Remembering the good times associated with our drinking and drug use might tempt us to revisit those experiences. This is a common occurrence, and I found it more prevalent when I was sitting at home, struggling with the fact that I was sitting at home when there was so much more fun to be had back when I drank. The important thing is recognizing when we do that, and then reminding ourselves of the entire true picture of our drinking. When I did this, I would see that the good old days were long past, and the last several years are very sad and depressing, and that would be what I was returning to if I drank, not the college party and version of my drinking. However, when we do that, we're often confronted with the next warning sign we need to look out for, and that is when we start negotiating with ourselves. I remember in rehab, I was there maybe 2 weeks when this started happening. The thought that maybe I got a little carried away with this whole quit drinking thing started popping into my head. And once I started entertaining that idea, the real negotiating started. Thoughts started creeping into my head like, it didn't get that bad until things started going bad in my life. Or, when I only drank beer, not hard liquor, I didn't have as many consequences. Or, I haven't tried just drinking on the weekends for a while. Maybe I should have tried that again first. We head down this path too far, it ultimately leads to the king of all red flag phrases, which is, this time it's going to be different. Luckily, being in rehab at the time I was doing this heavy negotiation, I decided to run all my good ideas by one of the counselors there. He had me walk through my drinking, which quickly shot down much of my negotiating tactics. I realized that yes, my drinking did get worse when things got bad in my life, but my drinking was the cause of the majority of the problems. And although I didn't seem to have as many consequences when I stuck to just beer and didn't drink hard liquor, I still had consequences, one of which was deciding to drink hard liquor after having too many beers. And I had already tried every form of moderation countless times, and despite wanting to convince myself of it, this time was not going to be different. For something to be different, things have to be different. All the reasons that led us to our addictions still are present, whether it was genetic or environmental, and those still exist. Now, I've had a few people ask me, Tim, if I drank because I haven't healed from my past, once I get healthy, can I drink again but be able to control it this time? In my experience, once we start to get healthy, the desire to risk destroying our lives again goes away. And we recognize that drinking again is doing just that. The last red flag I often see is when we start blaming circumstances for our actions and how our life is turning out. We cannot control our circumstances, but we have complete control over how we react to them. And I need to get real honest here. We didn't drink because we lost a job. We didn't drink because our significant other left us. We didn't drink because someone pissed us off. We didn't drink because our car broke down. We didn't drink because our dog ran away, or any of the other reasons we used to justify our drinking. One of those things happened and we ended up drinking, it is because we chose to drink over it instead of dealing with the emotions of the event. But Tim, what are we supposed to do instead? There's only one answer, and that is to not drink over it. We have to learn to feel and deal with our emotions without running to something to numb them. It is going to be uncomfortable, but so is being addicted. Life is uncomfortable at times. Life is challenging at times. Life is downright tragic at times. In fact, every example I gave a minute ago for justifications to drink actually happened to me all in 1 week in my 20s, and I drank a lot over it, which started a pattern of using my life circumstances to justify my drinking. It also set off a belief that I was unlucky in life because I was so focused on everything bad that happened to me, even if they were consequences of my own actions, when in fact, I am one of the luckiest people in the world. I drank and drove thousands of times and never killed anybody. And between the stupid things I did and the dangerous amounts of liquor and drugs I put in my body, I should have died so many times that a cat with its 9 lives has nothing on me. I have known so many people not as lucky. I know people right now sitting in prison for killing someone in a drunk driving accident. I have lost count of how many people I have known who have overdosed, died of cirrhosis, committed suicide, or simply died a long, slow, alcoholic death. Yet I was still alive and have the opportunity to get sober and have a second chance to rebuild my life. To call myself unlucky was not only provably false, but also an insult to the opportunity I still had to turn things around. Yes, getting sober is hard. Yes, getting sober is uncomfortable, but it also is an amazing opportunity that we are fortunate enough to have. And what it looks like is completely up to us. It's like that Henry Ford quote from earlier. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. I see examples of this every day. For example, I find that most people who are convinced that sobriety is going to be boring find every way to make sobriety boring. Look at what you are telling yourself about your sobriety. We all have the choice whether to just survive a life one day at a time, just barely getting by, or by chasing an amazing life where we learn how to be both sober and happy. So choose wisely, my friends. And thank you for listening to this episode. And I hope you're finding value from this podcast. If you are, I'm asking for 2 huge favors from you this week. Share the episode with one person, and please subscribe to the podcast, both of which help it grow. New episodes come out each Friday, so I look forward to connecting with you next week. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and keep living sober and happy.